I want to welcome everyone to IndyAWS, the October 2021 edition. I'm super excited about today's presentation because it's about App Runner, which is something that was announced last year at reInvent. Yet another way to run a container. I want to see what the benefits of that are. All right, let's head on. If you want to make sure you follow us on the socials, we are at IndyAWS and also the hashtag IndyAWS if you're discussing the event. I believe Laura, who you've all met, will be talking to us about, or should we try to live tweet as we go? And let me know if my audio changed for the worse. Hopefully did it change?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. All right, awesome. I want to thank our sponsors. We actually have two sponsors today. Are we going to talk about our new sponsor, Laura, as well?
They actually are starting next month. So.
Oh, okay, cool. So we got one sponsor this month, 6 Feet Up. So IndyAWS is brought to you by 6 Feet Up. 6 Feet Up is a software company that helps organizations build apps faster, innovate with AI, simplify big data, and leverage cloud technology. I co-founded 6 Feet Up in 1999. I've been the CTO ever since. If you are not familiar, you should find us on the Indie Hackers Slack. There's also a job channel in that Indie Hackers Slack. It's a good place for you to post your job openings. And if you're looking for a job, I would definitely poke your head in there and say what you're looking for. It's a great place to network. Also, don't forget we have moved from meetup.com to meetingplace.io. One more thing I want to mention about Indie Hackers before we go on. Don't forget about the Hackies, which is our this will be our third annual award ceremony. It basically honors those who do awesome stuff in the developer community, I guess locally and maybe globally now that we've got kind of a global audience. But I think Indie Hackers, if you go to indyhackers.org, you can nominate someone for a Rising Star or a Mentor Award, basically people who are doing good in the community and helping others grow as developers. Well, and I can say developers, DevOps, developers, operations, all those folks are eligible for the Hackies. Okay, I think with that, we can move on to why you're all actually here, which is running App Runner containers and code to scalable secure applications in seconds. I will let Siva take over.
Yes, so as we have discussed today, we are going to talk about AWS App Runner. It's basically like taking your code to like a scalable secure application in seconds or in minutes, you can say, right? So the agenda of the session we are going to focus on today is what is AWS App Runner? It's a new service. We are going to see in deeper like what's that service and how it differs from other container service AWS is providing. And what are the features of AWS App Runner and what are the problem does it solve, or like how we can utilize App Runner and what are the use cases does it bring to make our application efficient, right? And going to discuss some of the auto scaling features of the AWS App Runner. And finally, like how we can use the AWS Copilot. AWS Copilot is another CLI tool developed by AWS team itself. So we are going to see like how we can use that AWS Copilot CLI to manage the App Runner application. Already AWS Copilot CLI is managing the ECS. Now we are going to see like how App Runner support is also added to the AWS Copilot CLI. And finally a demo, but demo will be like along the session. But like you can ask any of the questions in the demo or like anything at the end of that session. Already, Lara introduced me, and I'm Sivamuthu Kumar. I'm one of the AWS Community Builder focusing on containers, and I'm also like Auth0 ambassador. I'm working as senior software architect in CEI, Computer Enterprises Inc., and I'm based on like Orlando, Florida. You can follow me at my Twitter handle at Sivamuthu under the same name in other social platforms. You can see in my blog and all, like I usually write and talk about cloud containers, IoT a lot. So you can, if you are interested in these topics, you can follow me in my blogs and also Twitter there. So first, let's start with like what is AWS App Runner? So we have already a lot of services available in AWS, right, for the container. We have AWS EC2 for the virtual machines. Then we have like a lot of container workloads. Then we have AWS ECS, which is like Elastic Container Service to manage all your container applications. And we have like the EKS, that's kind of like a beast, right? So we have like a complete managed service in Kubernetes that is also like maintaining the containers. Then later, like AWS announced the Fargate. So Fargate is like, okay, even though you are using container, you need to do some server management. So we will take care of the server management. Then Fargate is kind of like a serverless container offerings that's provided by the AWS. Now, at the same line, we are having like a AWS App Runner, right? So this is again like this is going to run on the container, but this is going to simplify a lot of the management overhead process developer usually do, and the AWS is doing all those service by their own, right? So that's what the definition it's going like. AWS App Runner is like fully managed service that makes it like easy for developers to deploy the source code or the container image directly to the scalable and secure web applications. So even in like ECS and the Fargate, we are having like certain overheads for like managing the container and orchestrating the container, right? But AWS App Runner is trying to solve all the problems. AWS App Runner is focusing on like, okay, just bring me the code or like bring the container. Even bring the container is like additional overhead. But AWS App Runner is saying like, okay, bring me the code. I will take care of like containerizing it and running it in the right runtime, application runtime, and also taking care of like auto scaling or like setting up the secure load balancers stuff. So AWS App Runner is going to take care of all those the overheads, and we are just going to provide the source code and the container. That's the only stuff from the developer side, and the managed service will be taking care of that everything, right? So how it works is, this is the AWS App Runner here. So we are going to add the source. We are going to point the create a AWS App Runner service and point the source like, okay, this is where my source code repository located in my repo or in my GitHub repo, and configure some of the build and service settings, like what is the command to run the build, and what is the port number my service is getting exposed, and what are the min and max of like the auto scaling configuration, those kind of things, just like the plain settings, right? So once we configure, then the app runner will review and also like create the service based on your source code and also like the settings you have configured, and you will be getting like the load balanced, a secure URL so that you can access your service, right? So even like whenever the requests coming in, it would be automatically scaled up and down. And also everything is like, it is taking care of rotating your certificate and taking care of like the auto scaling and taking care of like maintenance of your infrastructure, all those stuff like the AWS App Runner will be taking care of. So our responsibility here is like getting reduced, like we are just building our application and configure the build and service settings. So that's simple, like AWS App Runner is providing its service for like building a secure application over there. So the architecture here is pretty much, it's like explaining the same thing, but here we are having this AWS App Runner service, right? So your source code, there is like two different source code you can bring your source. One is the repository itself, right? So I'm having the source code, and the source code is like pulled into the App Runner service, and the service is running here. And the other thing is, if you have the containers already, you can point the container service URL so that like the container is pulled into this App Runner service, and that also able to run. So we have like two different source type here. One is direct source code and another registry, so that like we can run this App Runner service. Right? So let's see like how AWS App Runner works. AWS App Runner, even though like it's a managed service, internally it's having like the ECS cluster, Fargate, and we have the build service to pull the source code and build the containers, and the load balancer for like scalable auto-scaling functionalities. So as I have said, like even if it is App Runner, Fargate and ECS cluster only is under the hood. But if you are directly using the Fargate and ECS cluster, you need to take over like some of the responsibility for maintaining your cluster configuration and maintaining your the Fargate, the application runtime configuration, right? But the AWS App Runner, it just like abstracts all those things and give the simple UI or the simple configuration to pull the source code and run the application in there. So there are like a different App Runner components. So the App Runner service, which we talked about, it's taking care of like the auto scaling and the maintenance of underlying infrastructure. And we talked about like the two different source types, right? One is you can use the source code either from GitHub, and another one is using the container image that's coming from the container registry. So back to this diagram, we talked about the repository here, right? And also like the container. So, but right now, the AWS App Runner, it's supporting only two different runtime. Either the application should be Node.js or Python runtime, right? In case of like, if you are bringing the other languages such as like .NET or like Java, so those kind of thing, you cannot use directly the runtime, or you cannot directly point the source code for the App Runner to pull the changes and build. You need to point to the container. So that's why like we are having two different source types here. One is source code and the container image, but the support, the built-in support for the runtime, we have only the Node.js and Python. Still, you can use other language, but you need to provide the container itself, not the source code. Only the build runtime is supporting Node.js and Python. And the deployment, you can configure like both automated and manual. So that like either you can directly connect to the source code here, so that like whenever you are pushing the changes, it would do the automated deployment, or you can set it up your manual so that like you can trigger the deployment either using AWS CLI or the App Runner CLI. And finally, like you can point to the custom domain. Initially, it will give that the non-friendly URL, but you can point to the custom domain so that like you can, your domain will be serving that the services. Right. So yeah, so that's the overall explanation about like the App Runner and what are the different App Runner components. Before we dive into deeper, I will just show like how the App Runner UI looks in the console and what are the different components we can configure. Then I will jump deeper into that, like what are the different features in the AWS App Runner and how we can run the application from the AWS app. Right.
And Siva, are you taking questions at any time, or should people hold them to the end?
Yeah, you can ask me the question. I didn't look at the chat. You want?
I think there was a question about the runtime, but you answered that when you described the build. I had a question. Yeah. Do you need to use a specific base image to work with the service, or does any base image for your application work if you're using the container image?
Okay, so for the container thing, you can have like any base image because it's going to run on the Fargate and the ECS cluster. So you can have like any base image. It's not the problem over there. But for the runtime here, it's only specifically like only the Node and Python. And also like, I'm not sure that we have the version also. But the container, you can use like any container. There is no specific needs like either it's a specific base image or specific version of Linux images. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so now let's go to the AWS console. So I'm having this the App Runner here. Let me create a new service. Let's see like how that goes. So here there's a three-step process. So the one is the source and the deployment. Right? So here you can choose like either container registry or your ECR. In case like if you are using your ECR repo, you need to give some settings here so that like it have necessary permission to access your ECR. Or other thing like you can use ECR public, which have like public access. And other thing is like you can use the source code repo where you can specify your repo and build that application. So I already have like this repo, AWS App Runner demo. This is coming from my GitHub connection here. If you want to add like another repo, you can click add new and specify some connection name and install the AWS connector in your GitHub organization. Right now, they have access only to the GitHub, but in future, they might be bringing access to like a AWS code build or any other GitHub repo. So the source repository right now, they have only like a GitHub access here, right? So here I have already installed that application in my GitHub repo, and it's listing like the repository and also like the branch which I need to develop here, right? Which I need to deploy here. So I'm having like a AWS App Runner demo and the branch pointed. The next thing is here, we are saying like the deployment setting, whether I'm deploying manually or deploying as like the automated way, right? This option only available for the source code repository. If I'm going to the container registry, it's always like manual. There is no automatic deployment, right? So let me switch back to the source code and I'm saying like, okay, do the automated deployment here. And we are moving to the next step, configure build. Here we are talking about like what are the configuration we need to have. There are like two different options. One is you can configure the settings here, or other thing is like you need to create apprunner.yaml file in your repo. So the apprunner.yaml file pretty much having like the similar configuration, like what is my runtime and what is my build command and what is my run command here, right? So we have like two different runtime, either Python 3 or Node.js 12. Since this is like Node.js application, I'm choosing like the Node.js 12 here. And the build command here, I'm going to install the node dependency, and the start command, I'm going to start the application here, right? The port, it's a 3000 port, I think. Let me go to the repo. So this is the repo I have pointed. So here, like a plain Node.js service, I have the package.json and index.js. It's nothing but like returning like a response.send running here, right? Nothing much like there, it's just like a plain simple service. So back to the configuration, I'm saying like, okay, install the dependency. This is a build command where we can use the command to like build the application. And the second thing is like the start command. This is where like I'm saying, okay, this is the command you need to run so that like it can start the application there. And the port 3000 I have provided. Now we are going to the next step. Here we are going to say like, what is my service name? And configuring like what is the CPU, the memory details here. If I need to add like any environmental variable, then I can add that here, right? And the auto scaling. So this is where like we can configure some of the auto scaling here. So it says like the minimum size is 1 instance and maximum size is 25 instances, right? So whenever like we are running the container, it's not like scale to 0. That's a one like big challenge that's right now in the AWS App Runner, right? Because comparing to the other cloud provider service like Google Cloud Run and other things, they have like the scale to 0 functionality. But the one big no I saw from like the AWS App Runner is like it didn't have the scale to 0 functionality, but it still have that in the roadmap. So in the auto scaling right now, they have like two different types, right? One is the provisioned instance, and another one is like the actual instance. So the provision instance, there is like always one instance that will be running. But whenever like the auto scaling happens, then you will be having more instance bringing into that live so that like it can serve that the load balance and stuff also. So this is the default configuration, like it's doing like 100 request concurrency for an instance. So whenever like we are having 200 or 500 concurrent requests, then the size will be increased to like 1 to 5 if there is a 500 concurrent request, right? So this is the default configuration. In case like if you want to do like the custom configuration also, let's say like I need to have 5 concurrent requests per instance and do like 1 to 10 just for sake, right, for testing purpose. So I can configure like this kind of custom auto scaling configuration, and also like you can configure the health check like the information, and also like the security, like bringing the KMS for your instance. So this is like specifically useful whenever like you are trying to access the other AWS service from your App Runner code. You need to have like some permission assigned to that the instance. Then you can create the role and attach that policy and assign that instance role here. So whenever like this instance created using the auto scaling, those this IAM role will be attached to it. And finally, tags for like your the organization purpose. So I have provided this configuration. Now I'm going to the next. Just like we are reviewing, we are having Node.js 12, port number 3000, and we are having these settings like the 5 concurrent requests, maximum in size. So let's create and deploy. It will take a few seconds just to like pull the changes in your repo and run the build command and run the run command, so that like the service will be created over there. And you can see, okay, so the question for manual deployments via container, am I right in assuming you would be asked to specify a tag, or does it always use the latest tag? So here it's always use the latest tag from the container perspective, but you can specify the individual tags as well, right? But there is like a caveat over there. If you put the latest tag, it should be like automatically pull the latest changes. I have tested that in specifically. So if I'm like continuously updating the reference to the latest, whenever the new instance launch, it's trying to pull the latest. But if I'm specifying like the SHA or like a specific tag, then it's using the specific tag. Yeah, the next question, like for auto scaling, can you also scale based on memory or CPU pressure? Yes, so based on like the memory and CPU configuration you have made, I think like in this service, I have used the virtual CPU one and memory certain configuration there, right? So based on that pressure only, it's going to decide like which one it's going to take. Here I have used like 1 CPU and 2 GB memory. So it's going to consider that as your initial settings. Yeah, so the health check, there is no chance to set up an endpoint. I didn't see any configuration here. Probably like in the roadmap, they are discussing that thing for sure. Yeah.
For the auto scaling question, it sounded like still it's based on number of concurrent TCP connections as the only way to scale. There's no way to say if memory gets to 80 or 90% memory usage on a container that it should scale.
No, they are not giving that configuration. They are giving only this the concurrent request configuration only. But internally, they say like in case the virtual CPU or memory pressure is happening, they are able to scale, but they didn't give that configuration explicitly. I see like there is a discussion that's going on in the AWS App Runner roadmap where they are discussing about like to configure like this kind of threshold for CPU memories. This is, as you have mentioned, like this is pretty new, but there are like a lot of improvement they can do for this service to make it like more like efficient for us.
Since we're still waiting for it to finish building, to trigger a new release, if you push new code to master, or if you had updated the latest tag on the container, does it listen does it polling to see if there's new changes, or is there a way to hook up a webhook from the repository to deploy new containers if there's a new release?
Okay, so that part, like I'm still not sure whether they are like polling the changes or through the webhook, because whenever like I configure that, I install the application in my repo, my thought was like, okay, there is some GitHub actions or like the webhooks that's going to be configured, right? But I didn't see like any of the webhooks or any of the deploy keys or the integration here, other than the AWS connector for GitHub, right? So I think like it's mostly poll based or push based. I'm not like still clear like what it's trying to do, but I assume right now like there is some webhook that's going on between the repo and the connector here. But I don't have like clear answer whether it's push or pull based hook settings, right? Yeah. So let me go back. For the container, I think for the container it makes sense because it's running on the Fargate and the ECS cluster. So whenever like the new instance that's able to pull up or like they can watch that ECR changes. But for this GitHub repo, I didn't have like anything configured here, right? Like the push based thing. Okay, let's see. Yeah, the service got created. Now, if we go to the URL here, you can see we are having this running message, which I have added that in the repo. Right? So let me go and change that message. Let's see like whether it's trying to build that again. Right?
What an amazing world we live in, where you can just go to the repository and hit the period key and you've got VS Code ready.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I committed the changes. So now it should be like pulling the changes here and start building the new service. Yeah, I think it started already. So it start the new deployment and it's going to deploy like the new service over here. Yep. So that's like the overall demo, like what are the app runner, the configuration, and also like what are the things that's happening. Does it do a rolling deploy or is there a downtime? I think there is no downtime. It still can serve the older version. Once it's deployed the newer version, then it starts serving like the newer version there. So there is like
if it's using Fargate, it's going to use the standard like Fargate mechanism for draining and putting new ones in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like immediately killing it, just like waiting for the new service to come. So once a new service deployed, then we'll be seeing the new changes over there. So there is no downtime from what I have seen. Okay, so let's go back to the slide and see like, is there anything we need to talk here, right? So we have like a lot of other solutions. We have like the Elastic Beanstalk. So this is something looks like the Elastic Beanstalk, right? Where we are like updating our source code, and Elastic Beanstalk is like installing the source code in EC2 instances and running. I think this is kind of like a Elastic Beanstalk for containers. So we have like the other container service as well, right? As I have mentioned in the initial sessions. So we have like the ECS, and we have like the serverless container, Fargate, EKS, and a lot of other stuff. So here is a picture or like the animation. It's trying to explain like how usually the container app service is and how each solution is like differ from each other, right? So we have this EC2 instance running, and each instance, the OS and the orchestration agent. in ECS, it's a ECS. In Kubernetes, it's a EKS step. And we have the language runtime like Node.js, Python, .NET, whatever it is. And the app is running on top of that, the language runtime, right? And we have the load balancer here that's like serving all your requests based on like the auto scaling capabilities you are configuring. So for the ECS, so this is where the segregation that's happening, right? So in the ECS, we are having like the segregation such as AWS responsibility is at like the hypervisor level, and customer responsibility is like the instance level. Customer is like configuring the instance, and customer is configuring that language runtime and the application, and they are responsible for like build and deploy and also like the load balancer stuff. So this is where like the ECS, but in the Fargate, this is like a little bit moving up here. So the Fargate, it's saying like, okay, you don't need to do any server related stuff. Just take care of like language runtime and application, and the Fargate will be doing all those, the serverless container solutions. Basically, it's server, but AWS is managing that, right? So we are having those kind of serverless solutions there. But in an App Runner, it's still moving further. It's moving like more to the top, and it's taking care of only the app, right? So the customer responsibility is just building an app, and the AWS responsibility is like doing the build and deploy pipeline, and also taking care of the language runtime, even though right now it's only Node and Python, but they have like plans to extend it further. So it's taking care of the language runtime and also like the load balancer stuff as well. So we are trying to reduce like as much responsibility to the customer, and AWS is managing all those the needed task or like needed responsibilities to take care of these app development. So this is where like App Runner is. Let me try to go back. And this is where like Fargate is, and this is where like ECS is, right? So that will explain like a little bit for you like how like AWS is trying to shift the responsibility to itself and try to reduce the responsibility to the customer there. Okay. So there are like a lot of features available. I think I have explained most of that, but let me see. So we have these automatic deployments from source code. Container, we have only the latest tag deployments only. I think like probably they will bring more sophisticated configuration for the container deployment as well. And the load balancing, we talked about like the auto scaling and also like the final load balancing URL. And the logs and metrics, I think I can quickly show that. So here like the app service is running. Our service is running. So you can check the logs, not only like the event log and the deployment logs. You can check like the application logs also. I think I don't have any logs here. Yeah, the test service running successfully. So you can check like the application logs also. So internally, it's forwarding everything into like the CloudWatch, and also like the metrics, everything is like forwarded there. So from the portal, you can see the application log, or from the CloudWatch, you can follow like what are the logs that's logged from the application. So those logs and metrics also like exported to the CloudWatch there. And the certificate management, this is like one of the challenge, usually like when we are trying to host ECS or EKS cluster. But in AWS App Runner, everything is like configured, and they have their valid SSL certificate that's running in for their service, right? And the cost management. So the cost management, that's where like they have this the instance running as part of the auto scaling. So they are having like the pricing, different pricing settings, right? So I will talk about that one here. So the pricing wise, I will explain here like what are the different pricing, right? We have the provision and also like active container instance, and there are like a couple of add-on pricing as well. So yeah, this is the pricing for like App Runner right now, as they have mentioned in their site. So I have already explained, like there is a provision container and also like the active container, right? So there is no scale to zero functionality. So there is always minimum one provision container instance, or you can, based on the configuration you have made, like what is the minimum provision container, right? So that is coming around like $007. And whenever like there is a new containers added based on your request, then those are called active container instance. So that is based on like both your CPU and memory. So this is how like the pricing looks like. But still you need to pay for the provision container instance for a month. But based on the request, the active container instance will be added or removed. It would be taking care of that as well, right? So still you are paying the price for like whatever you are using, plus these provision container instances. So if there is a scale to zero capabilities added, this is going to save a lot of things. Based on the request only, we are going to have that pricing, right? And the add-on wise, if you have configured the automatic deployment, there is $1 per app per month. And the build, this is where like we are using the build time at $0.005 build minute. Yeah, right. Again, like you can configure everything by your own, like using the code build or using the code deploy or like using the ECS and Fargate cluster. But in case like if you want to do the deployment without any like the container stuff, then you can just like use this App Runner tool to make sure like it's easy to take your application to the container, right? Yeah, so that's what like we need to configure the container size, configure the auto scaling. So these are the costs we have there, and we are paying only the compute cost, and we can review the performance. So that's how like the pricing looks like. Okay, so this is got deployed, and we got like the new message that's coming here, right? Okay. So that's the overall thing about AWS App Runner. I need to show like one demo on like a copilot. So before that, I will explain like what is copilot. Copilot is nothing but it's developed by AWS. They are having this CLI to manage your ECS cluster from your tool itself, right? Basically, this is like a tool to manage your containerized application in AWS. So you can use this CLI to build your application, to have like the load balancer service, to add like more AWS services and all. So this is basically like setting up your VPC, taking care of your networking, and having some add-ons, right? So using this one tool, you can completely like control your containerized application and adding all the add-ons and services over there. So if I need to explain this one more, I need a separate session, but this is like a beautiful tool. You can check this out. I will share that link as well in the chat. So this is for like managing the containerized application in AWS, specifically like ECS and Fargate, right? But after the App Runner introduced, they have added the App Runner functionality also to the Copilot CLI. So I think here I have added, to save some time, I will just go through the command, whatever I have run, right? So in this one, this is the folder that has the .NET Core application running. So this is not supported by the App Runner, right? But I'm having the Docker file that's running the .NET service. So what I have done here is I have done Copilot init. It asked me a couple of questions like what is my app name and what is the workload type. In the workload type, I have choose request-driven web service, which is App Runner. And I mentioned the service name and what is the Docker file here, right? Then the Copilot, it's taking care of like creating all the infrastructure, creating the necessary repos, and creating the IAM role, cluster, all the necessary thing needed for that stuff, right? then it's building the image and creating the infrastructure for like App Runner, using the App Runner to pull the image from ECR, and also like App Runner service to manage my containers. And it finally gives the URL here so that like I can access this. This is the .NET, so the root URL is 404. So if I go to the weather forecast, it's having like the forecast JSON written here, right? So it took like the .NET Core application, but using the Copilot CLI, it's like making me easier to build the Docker container and deploy in the AWS App Runner service here. So that service is like running right here, and the URL is here, right? So here you can see like so here you can see the configuration looks like it's not directly from the source code, but it's coming from the container, which is pointing to the tag, right? So in case like if I am doing like another version, then I'm using the same Copilot CLI to deploy the changes as well. Then that version will be updated in the source. So that's why I have said like you can use both latest, and also in case if you are integrating with the Copilot or like in your GitHub repo, you need to update the source here to point to that the right version. So here you need to change the right version in case if you are doing manually, right? But in the CI/CD tool, you can do that automatically. Yeah, so that's how like the Copilot CLI and also like the integration with the App Runner works there. So the next thing I just want to quickly go through is like there are a couple of roadmap features. There are like a lot of discussion that's going on from AWS team as well as the community, right? So I have pointed out like some of the roadmap. The interesting things is like a scale to zero that is more efficient, and runtime support for like other languages. Right now it's supporting only ECR and GitHub. There are discussion that's going on like support for other registries or like the repos, and the preview environments, like whenever you are pushing the changes in other branches, then it can create a preview environment so that you can access. And there are discussion about like the firewall network rule support. So basically like there is a lot of discussions that's going on in this roadmap repo, so that you can go through that and get some ideas like how it works. And as I mentioned earlier, this is like pretty new, and also like it's good also because we see these kind of like similar service in Google Cloud and other cloud providers as well, right? So this is going to simplify a lot of things. Like we are focusing only on the application. The rest of the things like AWS itself is managing, but we need to add like more features. AWS has to add like these kind of other features so that like we can use in production without like any issues, or like without discussing like much feature we needed, right? So yeah, so that's the thing. It's going on solid. Probably like in next year we might be having more update to this in the roadmap here. Right? Okay, so the final reference slide here, I have gave the reference like the App Runner roadmap, and also like the Copilot CLI and containers in general, and also like the Community Builder program, where you can see like how to apply the Community Builders and what does it mean, what are the different activities they are doing. You can get those details as well, right? But most of the thing I'm here trying to check out is like try AWS App Runner and try Copilot CLI also. Find like the right balance, like, okay, which is right for me? Is it App Runner is okay? Or like I need to go deep dive into ECS or Fargate, those kind of things, right? Finally, its application is going to run on container. So it doesn't matter. You can run on App Runner initial, then you can take the container and deploy that in ECS, right? So it's not like bringing a type coupled with the AWS services like Lambda or something. So you can you can like try these different services and choose like whichever works for you or like for your client, so that like you can pick the right service for them. Right? Yep. So that's bring to the end of the session. So if you have any question, I'm free to take that right now.
Awesome. We have questions for Siva? I'll kick it off. I've got one.
I don't have any questions, but I have to take off. So just wanted to thank you for your time. And that was a great presentation. I appreciate the introduction. So have a good one, everybody.
Yeah,
Hey, John.
thanks, John.
With the custom domains and the certificate management, does that all just work if you have a custom domain?
Yes, I think like I missed it. Thanks for bringing that. So the custom domain, they have the configuration. So right now we are having this non-friendly URL, right? That means some random URL here. So in the App Runner service, they have this custom domain. So here you need to link the domain. Basically, they are giving like the DNS details, and you need to configure that in your DNS detail. Let me try. So they are giving like the DNS target. So if you configure it in your DNS, then it will be linked to that. And the other thing is like they're talking about the microservices, but whatever I'm seeing right now, it's not like it doesn't make sense like how to configure the different route path for microservices, those kind of things. I see like that kind of discussion in their roadmap. So eventually they will be bringing a lot to that, like configure the routes and all, so that like we can run multiple microservices, but still under everything under the same domain. Yep.
Awesome. I have one more question. How does this compare to the AWS Photon service? It sounds like there was a developer-oriented container running thing too.
Yeah, but I think like that's a little bit different, and also there is another service called App to Container. I think 1 second. There is App to Container, and also like we talked about the program as well, right? So there are like a lot of services which looks like similar, but in fine tune there is like some different, right? The App to Container, that is like a tool that's only the tool. So you can provide like the source code like Java or .NET or like whatever language. You try to create a container file, like a Docker file, and try to build that container thing, right? And the AWS Proton also like the similar thing, like doing the container and the serverless deployment, but I didn't get a chance to like try more deep on like the AWS Proton. But pretty much like it's trying to do the same thing there.
Any more questions for Siva while we still got him here? And Siva, if people want to get a hold of you, I don't know if you had a slide up that had your contact info, or if you had like Twitter you wanted to like promote for people to like contact you and ask questions.
Yeah, you can reach me at my Twitter, and also like
oh, perfect.
Yeah, I capitalize HTTPS, but you can go to that link and do that. I will share the slide after this meeting so that you can share in the group. Right?
Awesome. Let's give Siva a big round of applause. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're really excited
thanks,
to hear what this is. Again, I was kind of like the others. I had not heard much other than just the name for App Runner. I was excited to see a presentation to actually discuss it.
Thanks, Calvin, and thanks, Lara, for hosting, and everyone for like attending and keeping this session more live with the questions and all. Thank you.